Hey everybody, welcome back to the 8th and final episode of Stories from the Low Season.
I'm Jeffrey Paradise here with
Alex Kemp from Wolf of the Door Studios. And thank you guys for listening with us to these fiction pieces created by writers, loosely inspired by the songs from the album The Low Season by Poolside. This final episode is called Chlorine by Andrew Nunnelly. And once again, it has kind of an eerie, almost kind of dreamy quality to it. I don't want to give it away. It's a very captivating story. And there's, once again, sort of an honesty and a bit of darkness to it that has been kind of a theme that's developed over the course of this season.
Yeah, the authors have really found the edgy wild card moments in the music and expanded on them, which I've found really interesting. And have you found some amazing writers as well, Alex? So kudos.
Big shout out to our partner Winnie Kemp, my wife, and better half, who produced this and sourced a bunch of the writers on that. So this is a short story called Chlorine by Andrew Nunnelly, and it's performed by Lucas Near Verbrugghe, inspired by the song Sunrise Strategies by Poolside.
Call before you dig. The man operating the backhoe in James's backyard thought about it all the time. Call before you dig. Like it was a mantra. Nonetheless, there he was in the convulsing machine. Whatever his oversized shovel hit down there in the sandy soil sent a shockwave up through the whole thing. Shit. Literally, thought the backhoe man, as it was probably a septic tank. Maybe a gas tank. When James heard the knocking on the back door, he prepared himself to ask, "Hey, it's a little late to still be out here digging, right?" Truth be told, he didn't want the backhoe man using his bathroom. But moments later, there they were in the backyard staring at the half-finished hole. Cut out of the St. Augustine grass, by the hibiscus, the oleander, James in a polo and khakis, his work uniform. His arms long, lovelorn. The backhoe man in Carhartt, high on adrenaline, both of them peering through the humidity. James had almost forgotten about the hole that afternoon after work, after a couple of beers and whatever ESPN2 was carrying. But this was precisely the design of deposits. You couldn't just forget about holes. Still, it was strange to think of digging, of a big old hole, as being non-refundable. This was all happening because Amelia wanted it to happen. But now, Amelia was gone. James wanted to tell that to the backhoe man, but didn't. Instead, James and the backhoe man stared down into the hole, down at the cylindrical object unearthed there, its dull metallic surface making it look ancient amidst the darker soil and severed roots. James thought of the monolith dug up on the moon in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the apes dancing around it. He almost mentioned this to the backhoe man, but didn't. "Scared the shit out of me," said the backhoe man. First, when he thought he'd hit the sewer line. Second, when he discovered it wasn't the sewer line, but actually a large artillery shell. An unexploded ordnance. A bomb. Right there in James's backyard. James was vaguely aware that his new subdivision was built near an old Army air base. Amelia knew more about it. The day the realtor gave them the keys, Amelia wore her hair in a ponytail, and James wasn't listening. Still, this was a moment he often returned to, wished he could return to. He saw Amelia's ponytail, the glint of their new keys in the Florida sunshine. The backhoe man said he dug up a lot of strange things in his day, namely a lot of bones, but this was a first. So fucking dangerous. There was a process for this kind of thing, for removing it. Probably easiest to just call the police and set it all in motion. After the backhoe man left, James went back into the house and never once thought of picking up the phone, besides to see if Amelia sent him a message, an email. Nothing. He opened another beer, ate a frozen meal from Trader Joe's, switched from ESPN2 to regular ESPN. The sun was down when he returned to the backyard. He used the flashlight on his phone to make his way into the hole, surprising a few palmetto bugs. The artillery shell didn't exactly glint. Its dimpled surface, old splotchy brown and auburn. It was cool under his hand in the muggy August air. He turned off the flashlight, pocketed his phone, and stood in the darkness over the bomb. He looked left and right toward his neighbors' houses, then reached down into the darkness, groped with his hands, and lifted the bomb. He cradled it like a child, his feet sinking further into the dirt from the extra dead weight. The backhoe man came back the next morning wanting to hear the story, and James made something up. Flashing lights, bomb squad, a whole thing. "Great story to tell your kids someday," said the backhoe man. James pulled into the parking lot of the public supermarket. He worked there, but it wasn't his office. A stack of pamphlets sat in the passenger seat. A thunderhead gathered on the horizon and climbed into the sky. James worked in Florida's sprawling healthcare industry, the legacy of generations of snowbirds, now intractable, fossilized. His most recent job was in addiction treatment. Before that was HMO insurance sales, medical device sales, and pharmaceutical sales, from one gold rush to the next. When he first met Amelia, he told her he was finishing medical school, which was also true at the time. He wanted to help people, always had. Beachcomber Recovery operated a number of treatment centers across the Sunshine State, and their model was simple. Enroll folks for a 2-week inpatient program and then bill insurance. This new gold rush was liquid because the government required proof of addiction and later cleanliness. In other words, urine, pee tests, gold. James approached a couple sitting against a wall outside the liquor store, a young man and woman and their pit bull. At least it seemed like they were a couple. One dozed while the other used a little pencil from a Florida lottery kiosk to write something on the back of a used scratcher. "How you guys doing today?" The thunderhead opened and it started to pour. The swimming pool glowed pale green, and then it didn't. It glowed, and then it didn't. Faster now, on and off, syncopated, like a seaman flashing Morse code with a signal lamp across the stormy night to a neighboring ship. James stood in the dark kitchen, beer in one hand, light switch in the other. A switch installed inside his house to control the pool light outside. When he stopped flipping, the newly finished pool remained dark in the backyard. He had yet to swim in it. The last thing the backhoe man said to him when it was finished was, "Let me know when you've swum in it." James sighed, rolled his eyes. He put his empty beer in the trash and opened the refrigerator, illuminating the large artillery shell laying on the kitchen island behind him. He twisted open a fresh beer and turned back to look at it, shadowed like an artifact in a museum after dark, long past closing time. In the week the bomb had sat there in his kitchen, James thought of finally calling the police. He thought of putting it up on eBay. He thought of at least telling his co-workers the story. But he did nothing. James closed the refrigerator and left the kitchen. "Swum is a real word," said a whisper behind him. James tensed and went into the living room, the only room in an empty house one can be by oneself without being alone. pool pH should be 7.4, added the whisper. The whispering voice arrived not long after the backhoe man found the monolith in the backyard. In fact, it started precisely right after James brought the bomb into the kitchen. The eyes have a pH of 7.4, said the whisper. James sat on his side of the L-shaped couch, leaving its crook open, Amelia's spot, and slowly peeled the label off his beer. The whisper interjected. Amelia's family didn't have a pool when she was growing up. They went to a public pool where the water made her eyes turn bright red, like a cartoon bull. Amelia and James had only been married a few years, but already arrived at the point which, if not children, there was little glue left between them. Amelia knew all this, but James denied it, because cliches are like cancer. You never think it'll happen to you. And wasn't there plenty of glue? Not being a doctor meant he could spend time with Amelia. He took her to the resort in Jamaica. He bought her a swimming pool. He loved her. He was devastated. He called her and left a voicemail. When was she going to come pick up her bicycle? 7.4. 74. 740. 740, said the whisper. James looked at the clock on the cable box. It was 7:39 in the evening. The artillery shell, the unexploded bomb, hit the surface of the pool with an unintimidating splash. For a split second, having just hurled it, James thought the toss, the splash, might finally trigger the missile's long-forgotten intention. But instead of exploding, it floated to the bottom of the dark swimming pool where it settled into a lurking shadow. Like an alligator waiting for an unsuspecting victim. In many ways, this felt like the first thing James had truly done since Amelia left. A few days later, James woke up on the living room couch, hungover, turned off the alarm on his phone, and found himself thinking about Chloris, the Greek goddess of spring. When you thought of her, you thought of flowers and fresh green shoots poking out of the dark soil. New growth. The TV was still on, playing ESPN News on very low volume. Chloris was the wife of the god of the west wind. Though, as with many marriages in mythology, it was more accurate to say that he kidnapped her. He transformed her, and then, in turn, she transformed others. Narcissus, Hyacinthus, Adonis, all into flowers. James blinked. Where had he learned all this? James ate his cereal and looked out at the swimming pool. A mother duck led a train of 3 ducklings across it. They swam with a purposefulness, a determination that was belied by their location. When James was growing up, his father kept birds from their family's pool by installing an invisible lattice of fishing wire above it. Later, one of those plastic owls that kept perpetual watch. But James felt joy in seeing the family of ducks in his pool, was glad to have them there. He even thought to bring them some stale bread, only to realize that he hadn't purchased a loaf in years. He nearly texted Amelia about it, but didn't. Happy hour with his co-workers at Beachcomber Recovery always took place on Thursdays and always at the same location, Beef O'Brady's. $3 beers and half-off apps, wings, potato skins. The lone woman who joined the 4 men ordered the $5 well cocktails. The evening's conversation drifted from one co-worker's being tired of craft beer into other more ambiguous things he was tired of. Such drift was prototypical of these happy hour conversations. Football scores became a segue to race. The weather for the upcoming weekend might lead them to carbon emissions. The exotic new waitress, what's she, would end with them all agreeing on immigration policy. James was quieter than usual. The joy of the family of ducks was still inside him and seemed to be in conflict with what he was hearing from his coworkers. If only there was a way to tell them without coming off as a dissenter, or worse, somehow too good for the rest of them. When he was growing up, one of his uncles found him reading a book and said James was too good. This wasn't something you wanted to be. It was all too confusing, and James wanted to go home. When he did, he was surprised to find Amelia's car was parked in the driveway. It was after 11 at night. James steeled himself and entered the house, but Amelia was nowhere inside. A conclusion he arrived at upon entering the upstairs master bedroom, the last place he expected to find her. Though this was also where he heard a sound that drew him to the window, a splash. Down below, floating in the pale green, the lit swimming pool, was a vision. Amelia, on her back, looking up at the sky, separated from skinny dipping by only a bra and underwear, the pool light casting her shadow on the bottom. After a brief moment of panic, James realized the artillery shell, the bomb, was nowhere to be seen. Gone, vanished from the water. When James approached the pool, Amelia swam to the edge and spread her arms and elbows on the concrete, hands meeting in the middle. What's she? I finally came for my bike, she said. Oh, said James. I'm sorry for intruding like this, she said. James wanted to tell her about the ducks, but I saw the pool and I couldn't help myself, like it said my name. Amelia, said James. Do you want to get in? No, said James. They shared very few more words before Amelia took the stairs out of the pool and, still dripping water, led James back up to the master bedroom. That's the design of deposits, said James. After they had sex, they held each other in a gentle way they never had before. And James asked Amelia if she had seen any kind of missile or bomb at the bottom of the pool. She laughed, and her wet hair smelled like aqua regia. The next morning, Amelia was gone, and James woke up thinking about the Second Battle of Ypres. The smell of pepper and pineapple drifting in pale green clouds across the trenches. Men shouting, running, choking. It's estimated that the Germans' first use of chlorine gas at Ypres caused nearly 70,000 casualties. For a moment, jarred by this vivid memory that was not his own, James wondered if he actually did fight in World War I, and it was Amelia that was really the dream, a technicolor vision of one of the swimming nymphs who populated the afterlife. But no, there was her water glass on the nightstand. And there was her bra on the floor, still wet. In daylight, James searched the backyard and over his neighbor's fences to make sure the bomb didn't walk out of the pool on its own. It was nowhere to be found. He used the long pool net to scoop out a few bugs from the surface of the water. Thank God it's Friday, said the young woman in the back of James's car later that day. He found her in the parking lot of the abandoned Best Buy. She said she was from South Carolina, that her car was recently repossessed, that she had only been on the street for a couple days, that she planned on taking the last Roxy in her pocket on the way to Beachcomber Recovery. TGIF. James didn't flinch at the irony. Instead, his thoughts drifted beatifically. He told someone about the ducks. Her. She suddenly stopped fidgeting. She listened carefully and wept. She recited the poem In Flanders Fields by heart. She asked for $5. A Beachcomber Recovery orderly met the young woman at the automatic doors and took her inside for a pee test. One survivor of the Second Battle of Ypres, a lance sergeant, said about the chlorine gas attack, "It's an equivalent death to drowning, only on dry land." James knew this was just another way of saying, thank God it's Friday. Weeks passed in this new rhythm. James became deft at inserting his new wisdom. He imagined these new ideas as ducks floating across a body of water, into casual conversation with coworkers at Beachcomber, patients and waiters, and cops and Home Depot employees on their smoke breaks. For the first time since dropping out of medical school, he felt like he was fulfilling one of the most fundamental social obligations and ambiguities. He was making a difference. He was healing, and he was healing. A few days after James quit his job at Beachcomber Recovery without receiving his annual bonus, he woke up when he heard the front door open and footsteps on the stairs. "Clara Imova," he whispered to himself. The footsteps got closer. Clara was the wife of Fritz Haber, a chemist and one of the chief architects of the chlorine gas attack at the Battle of Ypres in 1915. Amelia undressed and slid into bed next to James, her skin cold from the air conditioner in her car, which she always had on max. "I'm pregnant," James knew Amelia was about to whisper. In May 1915, the same May 1915 when Clara's husband's clouds of pale green poison gas drifted across the French trenches, Clara Imova shot herself in the heart with Fritz's gun in the garden. Perhaps among the hyacinths and narcissus, the daffodils. "I'm sorry," whispered Amelia. James was too. Disarmed, they held each other. 3 years after the gas attack and his wife's suicide, Fritz won the Nobel Prize in 1918. A few months later, everyone James and Amelia knew was gathered around the swimming pool. James's old co-workers from Beachcomber Recovery and his new friends from nursing school. Amelia's employees and her girlfriends. James's mom and stepdad. Amelia's sister. Their mutual friends from before, during, and after their separation. The backhoe man drank soda water and smiled. James manned the grill. Amelia dinged her glass. James gave a little toast. 6 months ago, a baby shower would have been inconceivable. James began to laughter and groans. And while the backhoe man before him in the poolside crowd seemed proof of the point at which all this started, the bomb, call before you dig, James would never know if perhaps this baby shower was actually the consequence of hundreds of years, millennia, maybe not even in the past, but the future. Perhaps time clocked backwards in Florida. It was time for the gender reveal. Amelia held a small white ball in her hand. She smiled at James and then led their family and friends in a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ball hit the pale green surface of the swimming pool and instantly burst into a growing cloud of pink. The crowd cheered. Amelia laughed as James pulled her into a big hug, a kiss. Their eyes both sparkled with joy. He pulled away from her reluctantly, winked, because he knew there was one last thing he needed to do. "Cannonball!" James shouted as he jumped, suspended above the Pepto-Bismol pink swimming pool. Until that moment, James had never once swam in it. Swum. Time slowed down as he floated above the water. He knew that chlorine made salt, and he knew it made death. He knew that it was too bad that one could be too good. Getting closer and closer to the pink swimming pool water, James saw the faces of his friends, his family, Amelia. Then he looked beyond them to the horizon. He knew his subdivision was built upon a bombing range where the Army tested Agent Orange, C-24, H-27, CL-506, a defoliant. He knew that Florida was built upon a swamp that was colonized by religious zealots searching for the fountain of youth. He knew that Florida means land of flowers, and it was named on Palm Sunday in 1513. He knew that when the god of the west wind transformed the goddess Chloris, she became Flora. He knew the pH of the pool was 7.4, same as his eyes, which watched the horizon. He closed them, felt the water. Cannonball.
Stories from the Low Season was produced by Wolf at the Door Studios in Poolside. Contributors were Jamie Killen, Elizabeth Crane, Bill Hansen, Alex Kemp, Rebecca Hanover, Nora Kirkpatrick, Alexandra McGinnis, and Andrew Nunnelly. The show was produced by Winnie Kemp, Alex Kemp, Jeffrey Paradise, Toby Lawless, and Chica Barbosa. Recorded and mixed at Wolf at the Door Studios. Additional engineering and sound design by Bo Milkes. Original music by Poolside, remixed by Alex Kemp. For more music from the band Poolside, check out their website, poolsidemusic.com. And for more audio drama from Wolf of the Door, go to WLFDR.com. Thanks for listening.